Now, real quickly going up to the head here, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take off the flybar cage. And up here, you can see, taking out the screws. And what's going to happen is when you take out these little grub screws, see these little screws that pop out where the flybar would go, just kind of holds everything in place. Now the flybar cage comes off here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the 4 screws on the ends, apply thread locker, and I'm just going to leave this set off to the side, and I'm going to come back and start playing with the rest of the rotor head. Before I get too much further, I did want to mention one more thing about these canopy mounts here. So before I go ahead and put these on, what I did was I went to the little bag full of the spare screws, and I found one that was the same size threads, and just kind of ran it down through the hole, just kind of clean out the threads a little bit prior to installing this. And also you can kind of see that I don't have very much of the threads left out of the actual mount there. So you don't need too much. If you have too much exposed, you won't be able to screw it in all the way. But onto the flybar cage here. So the flybar cage, now when I took mine off, I don't know if you caught it, but I actually had a little washer fall out here, a little spacer, and I will need to use that. And so when you take yours out, be on the lookout, because more than likely you're going to have one of those, and you will need to replace that. So because I have to put that on when I put this back together, what I did was I went ahead and took off the screws on one side and applied blue thread locker to them, and I left the other side loose, so that way when I go ahead to reinstall this, I can install the spacer without too much complications. Another thing about these links right here, if you remember I was talking about they have a smooth side and a rough side. Well, if you position your flybar cage here with these little Allen grub screws up, make sure this one has the smooth side facing that direction, and you want this one to have the smooth side facing that direction. If you have these turned around, when you go to reinstall it, you'll find that you'll have problems putting these links on. So, like I said, remember, this one, smooth side's going this way, this one, the smooth side's going that way. Then, move on to the rotor head here. Now the rotor head, the easiest way to start off with this is to just take off one side and work on one side at a time. That way, it's, you don't really get confused about anything. Again, on this one, because it's got fairly small space right here, if you just kind of rotate it down, you can kind of pop it off without too much trouble. So anyways, you go make sure, just go through one screw at a time and remove it. Apply some thread locker to it. And actually, real quick, I'll just go to this. You're going to want to go ahead and take this little arm off right here. Oh, that's not a screwdriver. Alright, this screw is going to need thread locker. You're going to want to take these little ball links off, apply thread locker to them, and then try to get this screw off. Now for mine, these screws have thread locker on them and I cannot get them off. So again, I'm not going to force them off because I don't want to take the chance of stripping out the threads. But while I have it apart like this, I do want to make sure though that it does move nice and smooth. But then I'm going to just go ahead, like I said, apply thread locker to this as I reinstall it. Put this back on the blade grip here, and then once I'm done with all that, I'm just going to reinstall the link and then turn around and do the other side one at a time, so that way I don't get anything mixed up. Okay, now I want to go ahead and remove the feathering shaft, so that way I can both put grease in the bearings here in the blade grips, but I also want to apply some thread locker of my own to the screws holding the blade grips on. So to take this off, you're going to need two 1.5 millimeter hex drives, and down in each blade grip there is a small screw which you want to unscrew. Now be careful that you use quality hex drives for this. You don't want to strip these screws out because that will ruin your day, trust me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the order of all the bearings and everything in here, so that way when you take this apart you know how to put it back together. So first off, we've got the screw, and then we've got a little brass washer. In here, we've got the thrust bearing, which is 3 parts. top plate, and it's got little grooves where the bearings ride, and there's a bottom plate here. Alright, there's the bottom plate, same thing except the hole for the bottom plate is just a little bit bigger than the hole for the top plate. And also the bearing here has both an open side and a closed side. So when you put this together, make sure that the open side is down and the closed side is up, because when it starts spinning around, you don't want it to throw the grease out. You want the grease to stay in the bearing. So that's why I keep the closed side up. But anyways, underneath the bottom plate there is a small spacer. Then there's a bearing, then a blade grip, and another bearing. And we also got a little spacer. And we get this apart. And last but not least, a little rubber dampener. There you go. That is the order of everything for the feathering shaft there. All the screws, all the washers. But when you put grease on the bearing here, I just usually use white lithium grease just because I have it and it's readily available. You know, there's other greases available. Check your local hobby shop. Just get the grease all in the back side, and this it'll just kind of soak down in there. And then I blot off the excess and get ready to install it. And when I am installing everything here, I'll show you how I do this, because putting all this stuff together is a little tricky the first couple times you do it. So I try to keep this rubber dampener down in here as I'm pushing the feathering shaft through. This seems to make things a little bit easier. Now I'm using the screwdriver to push the whole feathering shaft through. Then what I'm going to do is, these two things, like I said, the bottom plate, the hole is just a little bit bigger than the top plate. And you can tell this because when you put them on here, the bottom plate will rock a lot, and the top plate will rock, but not so much as the bottom one. So what I like to do is take my screwdriver, or Allen driver, put that on there, put the bearing. Like I said, make sure got the open side going down, and that's going to be facing in. Put the bottom part, the thrust bearing, spacer, and the other bearing, blade grip. And this can be kind of tricky to get it all in there, but I find that this is actually, just for myself, the easiest way to get this all in here. Alright, and I usually just try to sit this up on something, but for right now I'm just going to hold it. Put this down over that, bearing on there, kind of sit this on top. And I like to just push everything together. But now I'm ready to put the screw down in there. And again, put thread locker on that. And don't put so much on there that it actually gets down in the bearings, because that will ruin it. But after you get everything tightened down, just make sure you don't over tighten it, because it is possible to over tighten the blade grips quite a bit. And if it's over tight, it's not gonna be good for how it flies. So again, after you tighten everything down, just, move the blade grips, make sure it's nice and free.